If not, it's fine. We can use one.
بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات. Thank you all for coming here today. It's the first session in our
Allahumma salli. Yeah. It does add a lot of discipline to you. In fact, what you're doing is that you're opposing your soul, you're opposing your desire. So everything that your soul commands and everything that your soul desires, you're going exactly against it. You desire food, your soul goes against it. You desire drink, your soul goes against it. So even if you were to acquire, to fulfill your own carnal desires, the Quran, the whole concept of fasting also opposes it. So the more you oppose your desire, the more you will reach closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a very interesting incident that occurred during the times of Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. So Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil. During the times of Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, there was a man that became so popular in the Medina. Why? That man had this talent. So he would sit down in the market, he would sit down in the souk, and then people would come to him and he would tell them the things that are unseen. Meaning if you were to have something hidden in your house, that person would be able to tell you what it is. If you have a certain amount of money in your pocket, that person would be able to tell you that amount of money without even looking at it. So Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam heard about that man and his talent. So what he did, he wanted to test the man. So the Imam went to the market, and then he took some coins in his hands, and then he hid them behind his back. And then he looked at the man and he said, how many coins do I have? The man told him exactly the amount of coins that Imam al-Sadiq had. The Imam looked at him and he said, yes, you're absolutely right, but I have a question for you. He said, what is it? He said, how did you reach to a point to be able to get this talent? The man said, every time my soul desired something, I went the exact opposite of what my soul desired. So if my soul desired sleep, I would stay up. If my soul desired food, I would fast. If my soul desired drink, I would refrain myself from drinking. So Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he said, you're absolutely right. That is a very good method to do it. And then the Imam looked at him and he said, how do you find Islam? Because the man is not a Muslim. The man said, well, my soul doesn't accept it. He said, but you put a condition upon yourself that every time your soul desires something, you would go the opposite of it. And now that your soul does not accept Islam, you have to go the exact opposite of your soul. He said, that is true. The man converted to Islam. He came to Imam al-Sadiq's house and he taught him the religion, and he taught him the way of the Ahlul Bayt. After that, the man left. A year later, he came to the Imam again. He looked at the Imam and he said, there's an issue. He said, what is it? He said, I lost that talent. Now I do not have that talent of being able to tell the people the unseen. He said, absolutely true. Because the religion of Islam doesn't want you to acquire a trait or acquire an ability if it wasn't for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that your niyyah is purely towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that worldly intention does not apply anymore. It's the worldly intention of your trait or that ability that you used to have is not useful anymore. Why? Because your purpose is Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us what? You do not need to take any other medium towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order for you to gain a certain trait or a certain ability. What you need to do is just to apply the laws of Allah. And one of those laws is indeed fasting. And that is the beauty of it. Because you notice that while fasting, even the strongest of the people, reaching up to Maghrib time, reaching up to sunset, you notice that that person would be the weakest of the weakest, isn't it? Because at that time, that's it. You have reached to a point where you cannot take it anymore. You're just looking forward to break your fast. And that's the whole point of fasting. It's literally disciplining your soul, emptying your soul from everything that it desires, right? And that's why you would notice, remember one time there's a beautiful hadith by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when it comes in this regard. If I'm not mistaken, the last time I was here, maybe in Muharram, we touched upon a bit of that hadith, but it was a beautiful hadith and I would like to continue this hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, the first thing which led to the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the following 6 traits. So there are 6 traits that we'll consider the first thing which led to the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first one is the excessive love of this temporary world, the love of dunya. The love of dunya is considered رأس كل خطيئة. It's the head of every sin. The love, always acquiring dunya, always looking, chasing after dunya. And that is something not desired in the religion of Islam. When you fast, you kind of let go of this. Physically, you're tired. You do not have that type of emotion inside you, that type of drive. People have a hard time even getting up for work, which is absolutely normal and natural. Hence, you would notice Rasulullah says the excessive love of this world, always chasing the world, only this dunya. The second one, the excessive love of leadership, the excessive love of presidency, always wanting to shine, always wanting to be in a role of leadership, like I want to be the boss, having that sense of love of presidency, and that's the second one. The third one, the excessive love of food, always desiring food. Some people are always chasing food. Everything that comes to their mind, that's the only thing that concerns them. Everything that they always like, food is the main concern. Now, food is a nutrition. It's important for you. But in reality, it's not the main purpose. Fasting comes and disciplines that, makes you prevent yourself from eating or overeating. Right? The excessive love of food. The fourth one is the excessive love of women, always chasing after fulfilling your desire when it comes to excessive love of women. That is something that would lead to the first disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Notice how the Prophet is using the term excessive always. All of the above are actually good things to desire, but not have it excessively. Not something that you just always think about. This is the only thing that comes to your mind. Open up your mind in a way that you do not have an addiction to something. You have the ability to prevent yourself from doing something. That's another one. The fifth one is the excessive love of sleep. Totally wanting to sleep, not having a certain schedule. Understand that you need to acquire a schedule, especially at a young day at your life. You need to have a schedule. Without a schedule, and the hadith, I really urge you to read this beautiful hadith by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. It's called Hadith Unwan al-Basri. A man that came to Imam al-Sadiq, the Imam gave him a schedule to stick by. Put a schedule to yourself to stick by. You notice that people are aiming to go to the gym. They are the most disciplined people in the world, by the way. Why? Because they stick to their schedule. They do not break their discipline. Why? Because they have an intention. They want to get to a result. How many people you find say that, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to start going to the gym tomorrow. And then I'm going to start going to the gym next week. And then it extends. And then that week becomes a month. And then a year. And then later. You know why? Because motivation by itself is not enough. The religion of Islam doesn't take motivation without intention. When you have the intention that this is what I want to get to, then you will get up and do it. But if you're only motivated, believe it or not, it means absolutely nothing. This is an age of social media motivation, motivation lectures, motivational speakers. It's not about that. I can sit down and motivate you from now till tomorrow. But in reality is you're not going to get up and go to the gym if your intention is not to, let's say, for example, either increase your weight or lose your weight or get a certain form or so forth. You have to have the intention. And that goes for everything. Not only going up and going to the gym. When you have an intention, I want to reach to this, you have to set your goal. At this age, it is absolutely important. And what better time to do it than the month of Ramadan? Set goals in your life in this coming year. Set goals for yourself. And that's why you find that people, for example, that work out or athletes, they stick to that schedule. They never break it. Even after they break their fast, they separate their meals in a certain way. It's miraculous, I have to admit. Some people, I know people that compete, they get up, they're non-Muslim. They get up, it's almost like they eat suhoor because they have to eat a certain amount of protein. So they get up from at night to eat and then go back to sleep. Could you imagine that? That's a discipline in that sense. Do you get the point? So that's the fifth one, the excessive love of sleep. As the addiction to always wanting to sleep, feeling tired. How many times do you hear it? Oh, I'm tired. I'm tired. You end up sleeping. The worst thing you can ever do to yourself as a youth growing up is sleeping in all day. This is the worst thing you can ever do to yourself mentally and physically. Your body will never develop. Absolutely not. It will never develop. You will not have the energy. You always feel tired. You always feel like you want to stay on your phone, on your tablet, on your iPad, on your laptop. You're always going to feel tired. You're always just going to sit down and flip through Netflix. How many times do we sit down or even open up your eyes, you grab your phone? That's the first thing everyone does, right? And then you start scrolling and scrolling, and 1 hour and 2 hours go by. That's a waste of time, you know, and then you stay in bed, and then you fall back asleep, and you always want to go to sleep, and you want to stay up all night and then sleep all day. This is the worst thing ever you could ever do to yourself. Stick to a discipline. Build a schedule, or else this is the type of life that you have right now. You will carry it with you, right? And it will affect you physically. That's very important to know. So the excessive love of sleep, and the last one and the sixth one is the excessive love of ease. Always not wanting to do anything. You know, always wanting things to come to you. Why do I have to work? Why do I have to work for something? Why can't I just get this? Why don't I have the privilege to get that? Why can't just things come to me? Why do I have, you see, with all due respect, of course, you guys come from a generation that right now with the click of a button, you can get an answer for anything you want. I come from a generation that you had to go to a public library and look through books to be able to get an answer for one thing. Do you get the point? That sense of having that type of ease, easy access to everything, sometimes is not good. It kind of builds that sense that you're always dependent on the answers being given to you or something being given to you rather than working for it. It is important that in the religion of Islam, Islam always motivates you to work, always motivates you to acquire something, acquire a trade, and not a job in particular. Do not fall into the misconception is that it's important to get a job. I'm not saying do not get a job, but get a job where you're learning something. You're increasing your knowledge. Get a job where you're learning a trade. A trade puts food on your table. You might not be wealthy, but you'll never go poor because you have a trade. You have something that it's a career. It's something that you own. You can travel around the world and work with it. Do you get the point? Right? Sure, go to university, go to school, absolutely. But always combine it with a trade. So do not fall into that love of ease. Always taking things easy. Always just wanting to chill. You know, you notice that sometimes your boys call you or your girls, oh, we're just going to sit down and chill. Okay, do what? Nothing. See people, sometimes you go to a public place and you find people sitting on the same table and each one is on their phone. To the point that some people, they start texting each other on the same table. Like, you know, the person is sitting right next to you. Yeah, no, but look at this, look at that, right? This, okay, well, what does that have to do with anything? And then everybody's in their own world. So what's the point of actually sitting together if everybody's going to be on their phone? I don't understand. You know what I mean? It just absolutely makes no sense. Sometimes you see couples, see people that are married sitting down, they're out on a date together, they go out on dinner, but each one is on their phone. And they're more concerned about taking pictures of the food than actually sitting down and spending time with each other. Rather than that, have you ever been out with those type of people? You know, the type of people I'm talking about, you just want to beat up. Like the ones that you sit down on the table and, no, don't touch the food, don't touch the food. And then, okay, what's so special about it? You know, get over it, it's a burger, it's meat. No, you just want to take a picture of it. Why? I have no idea. So in that sense, You know, sometimes do not waste your time on capturing the experience, because you will never be able to live the experience. Do not waste your time capturing the experience, because you'll never be able to live that experience. Some people amaze me. They're in a place such an a holy shrine of Karbala, and all what they're concerned about is making videos about themselves. Selfies while the shrine is right behind them. And what's the point? I don't understand. Are you a reflection of the Imam inside the shrine? If that's the case, not all. So in the Riyadh, sometimes live the experience. It is important to live that experience, and it could be with everything. It could be with your friends. It could be just going out to the park. Live that experience. Make sure that you always live your experience. Do not waste your time on other things. Do not waste your time trying to bracket this experience. And that's very important. I wanted to end with this, and we'll open up the floor for Q&A.
I think we'll start on the boys' side first. If anyone does have any questions, first of all. Well, I'd like to start with one then.
It's to do with Ramadan itself. So I was speaking to an individual, and he said, I work in an industry where I have to be alert when I'm actually working as a surgeon, and if I make a tiny mistake, then it's life or death. Now, he said, on the days where I do have to do these surgeries, I can't fast, because I've had an experience before, didn't go well, and so I have to live with that. Is it still mandatory upon him to continue fasting?
It's generally from your question, sorry. Yeah, generally from your question, yes. But then again, I'm not a faqih, I'm not a marja. So these are the type of questions that you certainly have to require an istifta. So there's something called a fatwa, and there's something called an istifta, meaning that you explain your situation to your marja. I'm sure he can email his marja, and then he will get the exact answer for it. But I cannot give an opinion on that. I'm not a mujtahid. It's absolutely tough, very tough in this regard. I understand totally that it's a very sensitive job to have. Yeah, or maybe the only thing that comes to my mind, I've been around my teacher sometimes where he got questions similar to this. He would always recommend that you train yourself before Shahr Ramadan. So then it becomes almost like a habit to fast. Yeah, so that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But generally speaking, yes, it still is. But, you know, again, that's my advice, is that email the marja. Yeah.
Are there any in the ladies section first? Anything?
So this is a kind of different type of question, but seeing as it's already been kind of a week of Ramadan, is there anything that you could share with us in terms of a lesson that you've learnt this Ramadan in the last 7 days so far, in terms of either through the Quran or tafasir of the Quran or whatever, that you could share with us?
I could tell you one thing. It's kind of a good question. I'm sure. I don't want anybody to think like, you know, we have unusual experiences. We're just normal human beings. Sometimes we fluctuate. We face difficulties in life. It is difficult for every person, be it religious or non-religious, that sometimes if you do not acquire a certain discipline in your life, that you're going to be faced with a shock that Shahr Ramadan would come and be like, oh my God, I'm struggling. You know, one thing I could tell you is that getting used to the fact that starting your day early, even while fasting, that's one thing I could tell you. I could witness to that personally. You know, there's something that it's very hard, and many people struggle with it. And then sometimes if you're not used to a certain lifestyle where you have to be up early in the morning to go to work, and then all of a sudden you do, and then Shahr Ramadan comes, that's when you get faced with reality. So it's important to get yourself used to the fact that even throughout the day, I could actually get up and I can start my day even if it was as early. Even when I'm fasting and it's early, I would get up and I would start my day. You know, and I would go on with the whole day. Or let's say, for example, try to rest during the dhuhr time rather than sleeping in and then just waking up late. If you were to ask me personally, I would tell you there isn't anything. Of course, supplications are very important. If I were you, I would stick to the supplication of Dua al-Hazin to Imam Zain al-Abidin salawatullah wa salam alayhi. It's a beautiful supplication. It is very good. And Dua al-Ahd. Dua al-Ahd after Salat al-Fajr, make sure to stick to Dua al-Ahd. Shahr Ramadan and 10 days after Shahr Ramadan. Let it finish up to 40 days, lead up to 40 days. Anything else in between, the Quran. Listen to, and I'm not saying do khatam all the time and that's what you should skip and be very quick. No, no, no. Dissect the Quran, study the Quran. Obviously we have our supplication, and another one that comes to mind, since it's the month of fasting, is Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq by Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. It's how to gain better ethics, how to kind of discipline our souls better. So these are the ones that I would recommend.
Ladies? Anyone from the ladies?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I wanted to ask, what can I do to be more disciplined in Ramadan?
In Ramadan, I would say the first thing that you should do is that, so as I said earlier, is that first of all, have an intention, meaning that the reason I want to discipline myself is because of this. So for example, if I have a hard time with my sleeping schedule, I don't know, I cannot control my sleeping schedule, then can I add a discipline to myself so I can have a fixed sleeping schedule? So have an intention, always assign a goal, and take them one at a time. You don't have to have, if you can, sure, it's wonderful, but always assign just one goal and say, you know what, this is what I want to get to. This is the goal that I want to reach. And that would make you stick to the discipline. Second thing is that implement it on yourself. So have it in your mind that I will not break that discipline whatsoever. I will not allow myself to be distracted. It doesn't matter. It could be anybody. The man, Anwan al-Basri, when he came to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, Imam al-Sadiq was during the time of the day where he does his a'mal. The Imam, could you imagine, out of all the narrations we have about Ahlul Bayt, that they never shut their door to a guest. The Imam told him, I have my a'mal. This is my a'mal time right now. And this is very important. You learn in life that sometimes do not give your time totally to people. You don't have to do that. That doesn't mean you're a bad friend. And do not allow anybody to make you feel guilty for that. No. Sometimes you have to focus on yourself. Sometimes when you have something to do, you have something to do. Sometimes when you're doing something that is very important and valuable, with all due respect, even if it was your bestest of the friends, they're going to come and distract you from it. That's going to break the discipline. You break your discipline once, then you're going to break it all the time. Do not break it for anybody. Unless it was your parents, that's a different story. But do not allow yourself to break the discipline. If you find that there's any means of distractions, keep them away. Never distract yourself. Always make sure that you're sticking to the schedule that you have. That's very important. You're welcome.
We've actually had one texted in.
Mm-hmm.
How would you suggest we make a work relationship with the other gender ongoing and avoid a haram interaction in the workplace?
In the workplace. Well, first of all, what's so important to understand is that the relationship between the opposite gender at the workplace, you can interact, but as long as it's work-related and it's professionally work-related. It cannot be personal. It cannot be anything that it gets to the point where it becomes flirtatious and personal. How do we acquire that? It's very simple. Is that this is how I am. I will not exceed the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will not break the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this regard. Sure, sometimes it gets to the point where it becomes overly comfortable. I'm not saying be a robot, but at the same thing, listen, and that's, by the way, in everywhere, not only at work. Imam Ali alayhi salam has a beautiful hadith in this regard. He says, when you befriend someone, make sure that you keep a distance between you and them enough that if one day they were to be an enemy, you can both go your separate ways without any harm. And if one day, or if this person was not to become your enemy and become your friend throughout life, then actually that distance is what keeps the relationship healthy. It is very important to keep the distance in every relationship that you have. You get the point? So the same thing with work. I'm not saying be a robot, but at the same time, maintain a relationship where there's always distances, where there's always rules and regulations. And that's something that you have to acquire, be it male or female. For example, there's a beautiful narration by Imam Ali alayhi salam where he says, do not joke a lot. Do not be a jolly person, joker, flirtatious, always trying to act cute. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, do not joke a lot, for it takes away from your prestige. So there's a certain prestige. We call it in Arabic hayba, right? So that certain level of prestige that you have, that would be gone when you start acting like that. Do you get the point? No one respects the clown of the class. Does anybody respect the clown of the class? No. No one respects a person that overly jokes. In fact, you will never take them seriously. If they were to come to you sometimes with a serious problem, you're just going to be like, yeah, right, whatever. It's just probably one of your jokes. It's probably one of your pranks. You get it? So do not have that type of personality. Always maintain a respectful personality. You'll always be looked highly upon. You'll always be looked at a person almost like a role model, that this person regardless, but you know what? They know how to keep a proper image. It's very important to maintain your image. Be it male or female, even in the way you dress, even in the way you carry yourself, it is absolutely important. For example, even within the month of Ramadan, fix yourself up. Do not leave the house like making, it's almost like you're carrying a flag, like, you know what? I'm fasting and I'm unapproachable. No, let people understand that this is something you do out of conviction, out of joy, not that it's a burden upon you. Do you understand? So the way you carry yourself is very important. Sometimes your image can reflect a certain way for others to deal with you. And that's something it's a given, by the way. It's a given. You show up to a job interview and you're not properly dressed, that's the first impression you're giving off. That's the first impression you're giving off. You show up anywhere, that's the first impression you're giving off. I could wear a tracksuit in the gym, but imagine I come and I sit on the minbar with a tracksuit. Regardless, I can't just say, oh, only God can judge me. Oh my God, people are so judgmental. No, it's not like that. And I've said it before, only God can judge me, Tupac Shakur said that, not Rasulullah. It doesn't exist in Islam, by the way, only God can judge. No, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the religion of Islam. No, you are people. In every society, people are, sure, only God can judge you on Judgment Day. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah, no, but people will judge you if you do something foolish in public. That's a given. That's logic. I can't break the law and I got pulled over by a cop and then I tell him only God can judge me. He'll smack me on the head. Do you get the point? So basically what I'm trying to say is that always maintain an image. That image, believe it or not, starts from the outside even. So at work or even when you're dealing with people, they would feel your energy that, you know what? I will need to keep my limits with this person. For example, maintaining your hijab is one of them. When you maintain your hijab in a certain way, there was a survey done, and in fact, they say it's psychological. People approaching women who wear hijab properly, the ones who wear hijab properly, are always dealt with on a professional level more than anybody else. So they're always dealt with a certain distance. And that's the whole point of hijab. Hijab is what? Is a barrier. So that's very important. Another thing, do not fluctuate in front of others at work. Do not let go of things and then claim other things. So for example, some people say, oh, it's okay if I do this at work. It's okay if I let go of that. No, stick to what you believe. Do not compromise when it comes to your belief. That's very important. Do you get the point? A third, do not engage in any type of vain talk or any ill conversations at work with the opposite gender. And again, I'm not saying become a robot, but at the same time, make sure to understand your limits and do not exceed your limits. It's very important to never exceed those limits. As soon as you exceed those limits, the amount of respect is gone. There's no way back. It's very tough. It's very hard. And I hope I answered the question.
But on that,
yeah.
You talk about maintaining this hijab as an image. Traditionally, we've always heard that, a man's hijab is to lower their gaze and whatnot. Can you even comply by that? So, for example, me in the workplace, I have to train people who are female. I get trained by people who are female.
Yeah.
It's impossible for me to do that. am I committing a sin on a daily basis by not
It's impossible
to lower my gaze at every single moment and not give them direct eye contact?
No, lower your gaze. No, by the way, it is permissible to give eye contact with the opposite gender as long as it's not being done by lust. Simple as that, yeah. You know, sure, I mean, do you always have to say, listen, there's a difference between looking at someone while they're talking to you and staring at someone's eyes, like, you know, to the point that it becomes uncomfortable. You know, it's almost like as if you're trying to compel them. It doesn't work this way. You know what I mean? So yeah. So no, lower your gaze on in general. But no, it is permissible to look at the, you know, in the eyes of the opposite gender when you're talking to them. But as I said, as long as it doesn't get to a point where you're like staring at each other. Yeah.
Yeah, another one got texted. Can you stay in this country given we're heading in a direction where we have to compromise parts of our faith?
This is not something I don't think I can answer, any sheikh can answer, any speaker can answer. It all depends on the person, him or herself. You know, I could tell you one thing in general. I'm not a believer that any place that you live in is your final destination. Do you get it? So I'm never a believer that any place you live in is your final destination. I'll give you an example. I have this thing, I call it the theory of the ungrateful immigrant. Is that sometimes us, the immigrant community, the ethnic communities that live in the West, we have this inferiority complex that if someone wants to acquire a life somewhere else, we call them ungrateful. You know, like, how dare you want to do that? You know, or like, aren't you thankful enough that you came? Sure, but that goes for everybody else that lives in the West. I have many friends that are Canadian that would love an opportunity to get a job somewhere else where they don't pay taxes. What's the problem with that? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have many friends that are converts to the religion of Islam, and they end up traveling right now. They've been living in Iraq and Iran and Syria for 10 years, you know, accepting the minimum. Why? Because they believe that they found a treasure and they don't want to let go of it. And they feel that the place that they live in will affect them. Now, that's something that you have to judge. If you feel that this place that you live in is affecting you, regardless, it could be Mecca itself, is affecting your religious belief, your religiosity, your deen, then you have to make that decision and go. But can you live here and acquire both and be able to live in a good, regardless where? Allah is present, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is present everywhere. But let me give you an example. How many people here have been to ziyarah? MashaAllah, many people have been to ziyarah. So you're going to tell me, if I were to tell you right now, when we come to the majlis, we mourn over Imam Hussein. Of course we do. We love Imam Hussein, yes. But then when you're in Karbala, is it the same feeling as being, I don't know, in anywhere else in the world? No. Why? Because there's that energy. You feel it. You know? So same thing, for example, when you want to pray. It's wajib upon you to pray everywhere. You can pray in your basement, you can pray at home, anywhere. But then when you're in Mecca, staring at that Kaaba as your qibla, it makes a difference. Do you understand? Yeah. So the place that you live in, of course, affects, you know. Now, you be the judge on that one. You be the judge on that one. And it could be anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions on the girls' side either? Sorry? Yep. Do you need a mic?
Oh, they're hiding in the back? Yeah, because I can't see anyone in the back, yeah? That's all right. That's a very good point. I don't know if that's the right person to ask, but I'm just kidding. No, inshallah. No, but how do you improve in Ramadan and get angry? Not get angry. As long as my daughter doesn't watch the video, I can answer. Okay, so this is what I would say. Honestly, the best method for that, is to literally discipline yourself before the month of Ramadan. So what gets you angry is what? Is the fact that you're not eating, you're drinking. Now, obviously, what gets to your mind is that you're hungry. You know what I mean? You get to this point where, you know what? I can't take it anymore. I'm really hungry. I need my coffee. I need my juice. I need my food, right? So that's a given. So the best method to do that is to fast days before Shahr Ramadan. And that's why we have so many narrations that from the beginning of the month of Rajab, leading up to the end of Sha'ban, that there's so many mustahabbat to fast. That's one. Second thing, always remind yourself that this is the month where you need to gain from Allah's mercy rather than wasting time on other things and getting angry. Third thing, wudu. When you feel like you're getting angry, get up and do wudu. That's very important. For example, they say if two relatives get angry at each other and they fight with each other, basically they argue to the point that they start yelling and screaming, basically being Lebanese, just not going to a lot of details. So you know what I'm trying to say, just in general. So what they do is that or even a couple, by the way, if they start arguing with each other, they say let one of them hold the other person from here, from their wrists, because they say the blood flows, and then they calm down. You know, and that's why we have in the mustahabbat that if you were standing up when you're angry, sit down. You know, so it's important to do that. So the best thing, but I would say though, relatively, is always disciplining yourself before the month of Ramadan, acquiring that discipline, fasting before the month of Ramadan begins. It's a shock. I'm not going to deny it. It's a shock. Why do you think when it comes to Laylatul Qadr, it's so hard to stay up all night, sitting down, reciting dua? And by the way, it's even if you ask the most spiritual of the scholars, they're not going to tell you, oh my God, it's so easy. No, it's absolute. Why? Because our soul is not trained upon that. So you come to the month of Ramadan, and then all of a sudden you have this long dua called Dua al-Jawshan al-Kabir. Of course you're not going to be focused all the time. Why? Let me tell you an interesting example. Ayatollah Dastghaib. Ayatollah Dastghaib is one of the great scholars in the Shia school of thought. He answers that question and he gives a beautiful comparison. He says, there was this person that went to study in Europe, and it was in France. He went to study university. And because he lived in an area that was dangerous, it wasn't that much of a great area, he ended up getting a dog, a guard dog, and he would put it outside, and the guard dog would guard the house. So one time he said, this person, I was coming back from university and there was a snowstorm. I had to cover my face. As soon as I entered the front yard, the dog started barking, even though it's my dog. But it started barking. And when it began barking, I had to uncover my face, and then that's when the dog had to calm down. And then Ayatollah Dastghaib comments on that, and he says, that's exactly what happens to our souls. See, the dog started barking because it saw someone that it thought it was a stranger. It's not used to the face, right? So the same thing if you were to visit someone that they have a dog, and it was your first time that you go visit them, what happens is that they start barking at you, right? Barking. I'm sorry, am I saying dog the right way? I know you guys call it doggy. You know, it's like you guys have to make everything sound so fancy. Like, you know, seriously. Like, I never thought a dog could sound so fancy. Like doggy, you know? It doesn't sound, I'm not kidding with you though, but you can't say that in Canada. It doesn't sound gangster enough. You can't introduce your boy and say, that's my doggy. It doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? You say, that's my dog, you know? Yeah, you don't say, that's my doggy. My doggy, that's something else. You don't want to get there. But anyways, so why? If you go visit someone that have a dog, what do? What is it going to do? It's going to bark at you because it's not used to you. And then that's why a dog owner, what do they tell you? They tell you, let them come and they smell your hand. Why? So they can get used to you. The same thing with your soul. The same thing with your soul. When you introduce something new to your soul, the dog inside your nafs starts barking. The dog inside your nafs starts barking. It starts preventing it. It doesn't want it. Why? Because it's not something it's accustomed to. So you come to Laylatul Qadr and you want to recite all those dua and do all those a'mal, it's impossible to get used to it. It's going to be very tiring. And that's why it is important to train yourself. So for example, a lot of the scholars, they say, even when it comes to Dua al-Jawshan, so the first week of Shahr Ramadan, separate it. Practice reading it. So like the first day, read, I don't know, 1 page. The second day, 2 pages, and so forth. leading up to Laylatul Qadr, then you'll be able to recite it. Your soul is just not going to reject it. And that's with everything when it comes to the acts of worship. Do you understand? Yeah. Yeah. It's the same barakah. Yes, sure. If you're reading it, of course, it's because you're the one who's reciting it. But if you're repeating when you're listening to it, yeah, it is barakah, inshallah. Yeah. Yeah.
So in the month of Ramadan and living in the West and not exactly in like the kind of olden days, is your wife obliged to have to take care of the house in terms of cooking and cleaning and stuff like that, or is it something that now because we're in Western society and in modern day you should have to help your wife do this and that, or is it okay to be expecting your wife to do that kind of stuff?
I mean, that's what I would say. Inshallah, we'll talk about this when it comes to the topic of marriage. There's a topic of marriage that we have on Monday? Monday, inshallah. So we will tackle those issues. But generally speaking, I think it all depends on the couple themselves. Like, what do they have as an agreement amongst each other? So meaning that, let's say, for example, if the wife is staying home all day and there's nothing else that she's doing and the man has to work all day, then of course there has to be tasks distributed in this regard. You know what I mean? One person has to be the bread earner, and the other person has to take care of the house, if that's the case. A duty? Well, there are duties, in fact, yes, as a wife and as a husband. One of the duties of the husband is to provide the house for the wife. The wife's duty is to take care of the house. Yeah. Yeah.
Unless there are any more burning questions, given it is quite late as well, can we have a salawat for Sheikh, please? Thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Sheikh, again. We've got more events every day, but please bear in mind the age categories. I don't want to see some of you at the 11 to 14 one and some of you at the 18 plus one either. So yeah, without further ado, yeah, if anyone wants to talk to Sheikh privately, please do so now, but you're going to have plenty of opportunity to do so. One more salawat, please.
Hello?